Hi there, I'm Jim Zirin. Welcome back for more conversations. Andrew Rein is with us. Andrew is president of the independent government watchdog, Citizens Budget Commission. The CBC's mission is to achieve constructive change in the finances, services, and policies of New York City. New York is in the midst of a fierce budget battle. The city is required by law to balance its $127 billion budget. Last February, left-wing Mayor Zohran Mamdani released his preliminary budget, projecting a deficit of $5.4 billion, which he would close by raising taxes on high earners and corporations, known as the tax on the rich. To do the income tax piece, he needs authority from Albany, unlikely to get it in an election year. So his fallback is a hefty 9.5% property tax rate increase, generating $3.7 billion, and invading city reserves called the Rainy Day Fund. Robust pushback has come from the more moderate city council, which must give final approval to the budget by July 1, insisting it could plug the deficit with a $6 billion savings plan that would not involve tax increases or cuts in services. Mamdani calls the council plan unrealistic. We're pleased to welcome Andrew Rein to the program to help us sort out what is going on.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome, Andrew. Now, the first question I have for you is, why is the budget so important? Is it like home economics, my budget in the kitchen, or does it why does it have so much significance?
It's not that dissimilar from a certain point of view, which is we get money from the state, we get money from the feds, but most of the money comes from city taxpayers, city business activity in New York City, and we fund police, schools, which is the biggest part of the budget, sanitation pickup, and all sorts of public health programs, the public hospitals. It provides services so all of us can live a decent and safe and healthy life in New York City. So we need that budget to be there for us, but we also need to be stable in the future, because stability, especially when the economy goes up and down, allows the city government to protect New Yorkers from those harms of a recession.
Now, by law, the budget has to be balanced, doesn't it?
Yes.
Projected revenues have to equal at least the projected expenses.
After the fiscal crisis in 1975, the state enacted the Financial Emergency Act, requiring the city to balance its budget in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles and a 4-year financial plan that doesn't have to be balanced, but you get a view. And so we have some of the tightest controls in New York City, but that still doesn't stop, because you can kind of work around it a little. It still doesn't stop us from starting to, what's happened now, build up spending that we can't afford in the long run. And that's the fiscal wall we're hitting.
Seeing a budget battle, often bitter, between the mayor and the city council, particularly the speaker of the city council, Julie Menon. They're both Democrats. Ms. Menon is obviously more moderate than Mayor Mamdani. Why is it the subject of so much political posturing and so much back and forth? These are just dollars and cents.
You know, they each have a different perspective on how best to solve this budget problem. It's good to come back for a second and give the mayor credit for exposing the budget problem. The previous administration had under-budgeted for known spending, basically hiding the fiscal wall that we were about to careen into. And Mayor Mamdani came in and, to his credit, said, hold on, let's be real about what the city government is going to cost us. And that's when he exposed a budget gap, proposed some savings. He deserves credit for that too, and his approach, but then was left after that and the governor's help with a $5.4 billion gap. And he's presented, as you alluded in the beginning, a false choice between raising some taxes, which he prefers, but doesn't have the power to do, raising the property taxes, rating reserves, which he does have the power to do, but he runs into the city council, who says, hold on, that's not the way to go. And we call his choices false, because we think you can save money and balance the budget because our revenues are so strong and the opportunity is so big. And we applaud the council for their approach to say, let's preserve reserves and save some money. But again, there's devil in the details. So now we're in this back and forth. But listen, this is part of the budget negotiation that has to be done by the end of June. There's more to come.
So a little bit of log rolling here.
A little bit of it. When Councilmember Menon and her finance chair of the city council, Linda Lee, and the council came out with their response. It was refreshing. Usually the council says, oh, here's another $1 billion or $2 billion we should spend. So their approach was right. But listen, there also is some devil in the details. So the mayor chose to attack the council's response on substance, on the big picture approach, and I think he's wrong on that because the approach is right to go with savings, attack some of the details. And listen, there are some questions about those council estimates, and I'm glad they've made them, but now let's look at them. But also make it a personal attack, which is, again, sadly, the part of modern politics that sometimes we all have to live through.
Well, what happens if they don't come to an agreement? I guess historically they always have, but the city council has to approve the budget, and suppose they refuse to approve Mamdani's budget. What happens? Are we in a constitutional crisis?
First of all, I have every confidence in the world that they will come to agreement. I have some confidence the state might chip in a little more money, even though the governor has already stepped up with $1.6 billion. In the early administration, the governor partnered with the mayor on universal child care. She's been a champion for years of child care, so she partnered and helped there, and then said, here's another $1.6 billion to help you balance the budget and correct some past inequities that the mayor had pointed out. Great partnership. But I have real confidence that the mayor and the speaker will come together for a solution. What I want is that solution to be smart for New Yorkers today and tomorrow. What happens at times when revenues are so strong and the pressure is high, we'd have short-term decision-making. I want them to come up with that kind of structural long-term solution that will benefit us for the long run.
Now, how did we get into this box? I mean, historically, over the last 5 years, city expenditures have outpaced the rate of inflation.
Right, so what happens, remember we had those great accounting standards. Still, in good times, which we've had, listen, there was, before the pandemic, we had the longest recovery in 70 years. During the pandemic, because of the strength of our financial services industry and business activity, despite it being an incredible jobs recession, it wasn't a revenue recession, and we got $13 billion from the feds. So it allowed us to bank some of that money and start to draw that down. So over the years, over the last 4 years, including this year, we will have spent more than $5.5 billion more than we took in because we built up a little savings, rolled it forward each year, but we were hitting that wall, and now's when we hit the wall. Because we've layered on programs, more and more programs, without making them affordable by saying, hold on a second, if this is the priority, what do we spend on that doesn't improve New Yorkers' lives? Let's cut that. How do we make government more efficient with technology? Let's apply that. How do we work with the unions to reorganize our workforce, get rid of redundant bureaucracy, and make ourselves more efficient? Those are the things that we need to do now. We should have done before, but now it's imperative.
Well, we've even layered on programs that involve postings, employment postings that haven't been filled, particularly in the school system. Now, one of the arguments of the city council is if we're not filling them because we don't need them, we don't need the teachers. Apparently school enrollment is down. Maybe you want to comment on why it's down. We could take those provisions in the budget into revenue. That's what Menon is arguing.
We have more than 16,000 full and full-time equivalent vacancies in the city. We have some parts of the city that are overstaffed and some parts that are frankly understaffed. The problem has not been a budget problem, it's been a management problem. We have vacancies that aren't in the right places, and the prior administration wasn't allowing agencies to hire. What Speaker Menon has said, and what we've said, is let's reduce these vacancies and save that money. Speaker Menon says this year, hold on, we have all these unfilled positions, there's money to be had. Now, we think she's overestimating the amount of money, but there's real savings to be had. And in the long run, she says next year there's also savings. But I have to also say that in the mayor's plan, while he hasn't been explicit about it, but listening to the budget director testify at the city council, the mayor's budget director said, let's reduce the vacancies by half. Let's give the agencies their money and let them hire and spend. That's actually the right way to do it. We need many fewer vacancies. We need to more flexibly put them where they need to be and get out of the way bureaucratically so we can hire where we need to, rather than have all these vacancies, all this money sloshing around and not letting people hire. That doesn't serve anybody.
Now, you argue Mayor Mamdani won the election campaigning on the plank that he had to make New York more affordable. And New York is really has become a place for the very rich and perhaps the very poor, and the middle class is really hurting. So we make New York more affordable, but if we raise property taxes and he can raise property taxes without the consent of the state government, does that make New York more affordable or less affordable?
Our affordability problem is multidimensional. We have a housing problem. We can come back to what the proposals are. We're smart to move on that. But property tax increases hit owners, hit renters as they flow through, hit businesses. We also significantly tax our utilities. And where do they get the money? They pass it through the utility bills that we all pay. Increasing property taxes would make us less affordable.
Less affordable?
Yes, it would hit all swaths of New Yorkers. Now,
so if you raise the tax on the landlord, he's going to pass it on to the tenant.
Some portion would be passed on to the tenant. And you think about it, some of these landlords are, for example, in the Bronx, and they own 100% rent-stabilized housing that is both deteriorating physically and financially. If we actually freeze their rent, as the mayor's proposed, and increase their taxes, that throws them into a more difficult position. Listen, the mayor has said he doesn't want to do this. He'd rather raise taxes on wealthy New Yorkers and businesses, which have its own problems. But frankly, that's why we call it a false choice, because we need to go to the spending side.
Now, you alluded to this earlier, but Mamdani wants to make it easier for the city to hire city workers. And there was a bureaucratic slowdown. It would take months and months and months to get appropriate clearances and to investigate their backgrounds and to do all the things that the city does. Now, if you take that away, it's going to cost more money sooner, isn't that right?
It would cost, but you can be strategic. You should get out of the way. Give agencies budgets that you think they need to actually provide the services. As we started the conversation, New Yorkers count on their government for safe streets, good schools, sanitation, all these services. The bureaucracy should get out of the way. If you approve and say you can hire someone and you have enough money to do it, get out of the way. That's what the central office, mayor's budget office should be doing.
Well, that's efficiency, but it also costs more money because you're hiring more people more quickly.
You can be more strategic about where you hire. We have enough money to have the right people in the right place if we manage it well. The challenge is we need more efficiency in services, and we need to stop spending money on programs that don't improve New Yorkers' lives. If we focus on those programs, hire the people, deliver the services, we can have an affordable government that's actually a high-quality government, and that's what we all need.
So is there an argument for a hiring freeze, and then there'll be attrition, and it will reduce city expenditure?
I would say the argument would be for strategic hiring. You will always have attrition, 5 to 8% every year. Attrition is a blunt instrument. You don't lose the people you want to keep at the right places and the right times. Attrition will always happen. What you need to do is take your vacancies, your funding, and put it where you need it to deliver services. That's the smart way to do it. Attrition will always take care of the shrinkage. What you need to do is, when you're replacing people, put the money in the positions where you need them and let the agencies do their job to deliver for New Yorkers.
Of course, there's attrition often because of retirement, and one of the fertile areas for investigation is whether we're paying pensions to people who aren't eligible for pensions.
That might be fertile for investigation. I will say the Mayor's Savings Program, and we should say that he issued Executive Order 12, which talked about a higher quality, more efficient, focused government and saving by focusing on services that work and getting rid of services
that don't. Well, in every
don't.
agency, he wants a chief savings officer.
Yes.
Is that a good idea?
It's the right approach and the right criteria, but his ambition is too low. It's basically $1 billion a year, or over this and next year, $1.7 billion when you combine them. That is woefully inadequate for the need, given the budget gap, and the opportunity, given how much spending has increased over time without any serious effort to make government more efficient. So it's the right approach, but he needs to go in there and figure out how to manage these agencies, what's working, what's not, and be much more ambitious.
What about the so-called rainy day fund that he wants to invade? Are you going to get much revenue from that?
So he proposes to take a little under $1 billion from what is a $2 billion rainy day fund. It's good that we have it for the first time. It was enacted, voted on by the voters in New York, and a charter amendment enacted by state law because they had to change the Financial Emergency Act. We only have $2 billion in there. We estimate that The revenue loss over 2 years of a typical pre-pandemic recession is about $15 billion. $2 billion is just a small sum, and he's talking about taking some of that during the time when our revenues are strong. Last year,
Drop in the bucket.
tax revenues increased 8.3% last year, 5% this year. Revenues are strong. We got to protect that rainy day fund and make it bigger. I mean, just look around us at the risks in the economy. No better reminder on the need for a rainy day fund than to lift your head up, look at the global risks, look at the question of supply chain, look at the question of our weak jobs recovery and say, we need a rainy day fund.
Well, politically, the bloating in the budget has occurred, he could argue, because of his predecessors. If he doesn't want to go back to de Blasio, he certainly can go back to Adams. And he has. He's talked about the Adams budget, and that's what's created the shortfall. But isn't that really what he ought to be doing, to attack the budget of his predecessors? It's become fashionable in politics to attack your predecessors.
I'd rather the energy be focused on identifying the spending that's not working, identifying how to be more efficient. The three questions are, will he have the political will to make those hard choices? Will he have the managerial expertise centrally and within the agencies to identify and implement them? And will he have the time to do it by the end of fiscal year 27, where he has to balance the budget? But that's where his energy should be focused. You can attack the past, but listen, we have a state class size mandate that we estimate, if you get rid of, would save the city $1.2 billion. We adjust school spending up.
What was a class mandate?
So the state mandated a phase in over 5 years that all classes in New York City meet a certain size, and most of them have to shrink.
School classes.
School classes. So
now
the first 2 years were
why has there been this shrinking in enrollment?
So we should talk about both those because they interact. First years, we had shrunk class sizes in early grades and high need schools so we had already done that. And frankly, shrinking enrollment, we've lost 100,000 students. Fertility rates are down, but people are choosing to leave more than they're choosing to come. And our school system shrunk. I was senior policy advisor to the school's chancellor 25 years ago. We had 1.1 million. Now we have under 900,000, around 900,000. So the bottom line is class sizes have already naturally shrunk, or there was an effort to shrink them. But why tie the mayor's hands on education, forcing him to move money from other places when he could be freed to do that, shrink classes where they already are and where they need, and use that money for higher order uses? That makes more sense. Albany should lift that mandate.
Education is the biggest item in the budget, isn't it?
Right. $38 billion. We spend $42,000 a kid. We're not getting the results. Some of it, as I said, we're forced to shrink class sizes. We have naturally increased spending in schools where there's enrollment grows, which happens, but we haven't been shrinking it where it shrinks. It makes no sense. There's money there. Special education, especially for kids we haven't served well, these so-called Carter cases, we spent a lot of money serving kids in private schools, which is very expensive, rather than doing it well ourselves. There's money to be had here. There's all sorts of money within the education system and in procurement education. That's where you go where the money is when you're trying to save it.
Well, he says he's opposed to charter schools. I mean, if you promote charter schools, won't that save money?
What should happen is we should fund charter schools equally with the public schools in general. It's not about saving money. Listen, a little competition
but you're taking
has served
students out of the public school system.
So some of the shrinking has shifted to charter schools, which
less
we
need
fund,
for teachers, salaries.
which the city does fund, and state through the city funds. Some of that shrinking, but some of the shrinking is we aren't an affordable, competitive place to live. We want New York to attract all different New Yorkers. We want it to a place that attracts all different businesses that want to hire and grow. Growth is our best strategy for both balancing the budget and for opportunity in New York and be attractive to people. We have domestic net out migration, which we've always had, but it even ticked up from 91,000 for a few more thousand next year. We need people to want to stay and live in New York. We need businesses to want to grow here, which is why you want an efficient government, cost effective. It's always going to be expensive to be here, but we want it to be worth the money, whether you're a middle class New Yorker, a wealthy New Yorker, or a poor New Yorker who's making their way.
But raising taxes is an anti-growth strategy.
So there is a legitimate debate about the impact of tax increases. What we found, looking at high-income New Yorkers, is our share of the nation's millionaires. Listen, the number of millionaires doubled in New York State between 2010 and 2022. Fine. But it tripled the rest of the country. It quadrupled in Florida. We have a shrinking share of the nation's millionaires, and we also have the highest top marginal income tax rate. We need to make sure that those people stay here. If our share hadn't shrunk, New York City would have $3 billion more in revenue today. New York State would have $11 billion. We could really use that money.
So we hear a lot these days about productivity, and the private sector has percentages of productivity, which of course produce growth and also curtail expenditures. Has New York kept pace with the private sector in productivity?
Harder to measure in the public sector. We've had about a 2% a year annual productivity increase in the private sector. There is no reason to believe that the public sector has at all kept pace. We haven't applied technology. We haven't redesigned our work processes. That is how, in part, the private sector has increased productivity. There hasn't been a serious effort on that. That's actually what we need to do now. Who better than this mayor who believes in government to work within government, to work with the unions to figure out how to do it better? Listen, we also have labor contracts. We want to expand job titles, change work rules so there can be more flexible, more efficient management, but we've got to work with the unions. It's how we're structured. But let's share some of those gains so we have a lower cost government that actually can fund raises without breaking the bank. That's what we hope that this mayor, who believes in government, and he's very articulate and strong about that, he should be able to make it work and deliver. The question is, will that be the focus of his energy?
Well, going back 5 years or 10 years, in New York City, has there been any study of productivity and efficiency of city workers?
Not on a gross basis, but we certainly haven't seen any of the efforts to do that. We lived through a great expansion during the de Blasio years, and so we just added more spending, and there was effort to really expand government. The Adams years, he got rid of some underspending, but didn't really affect productivity. And then, of course, the migrant crisis and other issues in the administration. We haven't seen this effort in a long time, but it is now the time to do it because both the service quality demands it and the budget demands it. I will say this. We did a survey of New York City residents at the Citizens Budget Commission. Only 27% believe that services are excellent or good. Only 11% believe that New York City is spending their dollars wisely. There is no better indication than your customers telling you got to get your business in order.
Touching on New York City's relationship with the state, New York City contributes more than half of the revenue to New York State and gets back about 42% or something of the aid from the state. I mean, the relationship has always been unfair and unbalanced, so maybe Mamdani can do better.
It is the economic engine of much of the state, and it supplies state government with a lot of its money. We should be fair that part of what government does is redistribute. The mayor would never say, and I'm sure he wouldn't, that, oh, Manhattan generates more money, we shouldn't be sending it to Brooklyn or the Bronx. No, we want to right-size that relationship. And the mayor's right. And the governor came back and said, okay, here's public health funding that you get disproportionately funded. We're going to rectify that. So they've already worked on some of this. There might be some more areas. So this is a partnership. The state is in its budget. It's right now 7 days late in enacting its budget. So we'll see what that partnership bodes. But I'm glad that they started well together. This governor was a great partner in New York City in the last administration, through thick and thin of the administration. So we'll see how this goes.
Okay, so I have a question for you, Andrew Rein. And the question is, will spending cuts make New York City more affordable than tax increases?
Smart spending reductions will allow us to be more affordable and more financially stable. If we cut the wrong things, we'll hurt New Yorkers. We need good schools. We need public safety. We need our trash picked up. Sometimes this discussion becomes polemical. And what the mayor said is, if we try to reduce spending, we're going to decimate services. If you do it poorly, he's exactly right. If you do it smartly and you have enough time and you have the managerial skill, you can do it while preserving the right services. So I don't think it's about the level. It's about making the smart choices, because if you fund the services that actually improve New Yorkers' lives, it will be both more affordable city and a more affordable government.
Or as LaGuardia said, there isn't a Republican or a Democratic way of cleaning the streets.
Look at what Commissioner Tisch did when she was sanitation commissioner. Can you believe we're containerizing our trash in New York City? That was a bold move. That kind of stuff, we need to keep making those bold choices. And some of that boldness has to be in running an efficient government and saying, hold on a second. We have to make the hard choice. Literally, schools shrunk from 500 to 300 students, and we said, you get the same amount of money, the same amount of teachers, the same amount of stuff. It makes no sense. Politically, it's challenging. We have to understand. They respond to the people and political forces, but the smart choices are sometimes the hard choices. And I think if this mayor makes them, there's no one better to explain those trade-offs than him. So he should explain why this is good for New York today and tomorrow, because we should all worry about our future New Yorkers as we do today. If we hit a recession and we're not prepared and we have to decimate services, that's the real tragedy.
That would be the real tragedy. So Andrew Rein, thank you so much for coming by, and thank you for coming by. Tune in next week for more conversations. Don't forget to download our app so that you can hear our programs when you're driving or when you're walking down the street. All the best. Tune in next week.